Okay, so our next presenter is Merron Ipsen. Merron joined us about 2.5 years ago. We've done a lot of work in that Timor West area, which is where she comes from, under a project that we called Renew, that James Williams and I were both involved in as well. And basically, when that project came to an end, Farming for Sustainable Soils picked it up, and I guess we've had the advantage of basically building on a lot of stuff over the last 5 or 6 years. Merron's a local. She was nominated by the group. She hadn't been out of Melbourne University Agriculture all that long, I suppose. She's married into a local family, and like at least one other facilitator, she went off and had a baby in the middle of her period, basically, so with us. So, Merron, come on down.
Thanks very much, Phil. I just want to commend both Craig and Adam first, just before I start, on their description of what we've done so far. I think that they've really both, I hope that I don't reiterate too much of what they're saying and bore you all, but yeah, so as Phil was sort of alluding to, my journey started with the Farming for Sustainable Soils project. Our group we started to form off the back of the 2015 drought, so the group started forming together, and I married into a family, my husband sitting over there, Mark. I met Mark when I was studying at Dookie College in 2006, and yes, and in 2014 we finally married on the property which we moved up to at Timor West, and just naturally this project, an opportunity came up. Their family were involved in the local land care, and it was actually through the synergy with the local land care group that this opportunity arose. And you know, my husband being the businessman and me being more the academic, I've been fascinated with soils ever since I studied it. I've worked for a couple of agronomy firms, worked in animal merch, like it's been my whole life. And actually leading on from Craig, I actually grew up between Mysia and Witchatella on a property, so I really understand the context and the issues that farmers have faced within the region. So yeah, when this opportunity arose and I was nominated, yeah, I was really encouraged, and then found out a month later that I was pregnant with my first child. But anyway, hopefully that gives you a bit of background of who I am and where I fit in. I'm not really up with the technology that well. Here we go. So look, I won't bang on too much about how the local group formed and everything, because there was a fair bit of that said yesterday, and I have to acknowledge Diane and Danny Mullins, who are in the room here today, because without their help and mentoring, I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I have. So I would like people to acknowledge all the effort that they've put into the group. So in terms of the geographical area, and I love this slide that Phil's provided for me, because it gives a really good visual of and a context to the soil issues that we have. Like, look at all the geological formations in this small area. We often say, oh, you know, like the soils in Maryborough, like what's the main soil type? Well, look what we've had to contend with, like this. Yeah, the geological formations that everything's based on. And so if we go north-south, we're looking at sort of Bet area further south to, say, Bung Bong. And then if you're going, you know, widthwise, we're looking at Maryborough right across to Raskar, just this side of Avoca. So whilst it's probably not the most geographically large area like what Adam's got to contend with, even in this sort of 25k radius, we've got such a high variability in the soils and the soil types that we've had to contend with, and a lot of these are very, as we saw at Dunluce yesterday, really highly weathered, and that creates challenges in themselves. In terms of the main enterprises in this area, it's unlike Craig and Adam, there's probably been less focused in terms of continuous cropping. This land, like this area, traditionally was more a mixed enterprise, and still is to this day. there is a lot, again, still broadacre cereal cropping and later and more recently probably been into oilseed pulses, that type of thing. There's also a huge history in hay, so it's been known as an export hay area, and obviously there's 2 chaff mills just within the Maryborough area, one Southern Cross at Carisbrook, and then Cranberries obviously in town. So, I mean, that was the basis of how a lot of farms formed. I know that the history in Mark's, my husband's family, was like they expanded their farm off sheaf hay. And to complement into all of this system was obviously sheep, which traditionally was probably more merino for wool, but as the primarily industries picked up, we're probably seeing more people go into prime lamb production as another income stream. So this slide I found a really challenging one because, as I said, if you looked at that slide that we just saw just then, what is a typical soil in our area? Well, we've got a high range of variability, and look, I think the other thing, Maryborough in the area sort of gets a bit of a bad rap as being known as an area of really poor soils. I'd say that's a really sweeping generalisation. Yes, we do have some pretty ordinary areas of remnant bush and surrounding that have pretty marginal soils, but in the midst of that landform, we've also got some really high, good fertility, and given our rainfall zone, we've also got areas of like the length of growing season means that we're even though our soils may not be quite as good as some areas with lesser rainfall, we're still getting really good yields. So that when we were talking about, even the Honourable Michael Jeffrey was talking about all the relationships between the water, the soil, the plants and the hydrology, that's where we've got to not only look at what's going on in the soil but the whole system in itself. From this slide, I'm just going to pick on the Dunloo soil that we were working with because we've done a fair few trials in that soil type, and it's what you guys got to visualise and see yesterday. So, the top soil being pretty fine sandy loam or loam, and then we've got that concretion in the subsoil, and like we're not even getting to 35 centimetre, it's like at 10 centimetres. So that's, but mind you, as soon as we do get the rainfall, that we can get root penetration through it. Unfortunately though, all the plant roots that we can get through that are then pruned off in the summer as soon as that concrete layer dries out. So it's really hard to try and maintain cover for the whole year when you've got that limitation. It was really interesting. We did a lot of soil cores in the first year as opposed to pits. So we've got some of the local fertiliser agents who are also big farmers within the area. They did some soil cores for us. So we actually had 50 paddocks which had matched topsoil and subsoil test, and we actually did a full core and we actually did dispersion tests. So it was so funny when Grant put the picture up with his yabby net. We pretty much did the same thing, just in little plastic cups, just took a little bit from each layer in the soil and actually looked at the dispersiveness of the soil, and obviously it's a pretty common problem within the area too, the sodicity. And then at depth, we've got a lot of free limestone, and this is just due to the parent material that a lot of these soils formed off, which Phil was explaining yesterday. That yes, we have a lot of either limestone at depth, which is then increasing the pH to sort of 8.59, which plants aren't going to grow in real well. So our journey, again, in the framework of FFS, we started off collecting baseline assessments, and as I just went into the soil cores, we've actually got the GPS locations of those soil cores and photos of all those cores too, which we, as a legacy, that has never really been done within the area, so we're actually going to document all that professionally, so we have a platform to work from. So we've captured that knowledge base. We then went into some paddocks and dug some soil pits, and in this paddock we started finding limestone, free limestone at 60 centimetres, and yeah, it was interesting to see that like it's right on a creek flat, so you wouldn't have thought that we'd only have that limitation at such a shallow depth. it's in this field here. I've got Doris Blessing next to me and my little son's in vitro there, he's still growing. So at this stage, this is in August 2016. And what we gathered from all the information that we captured, that there is not one thing that fits all. Whilst we've got common themes going throughout our issues, it really has to be a paddock by paddock assessment. So what the prescription that we'll give at Dunluce may be different to the prescription that we give at Timor West, which will be different to what we see at Bet or at Rafscar. We can't just put a blanket approach, and sometimes we may need to use two different approaches in the same paddock. The professionals, I have to say that the thing that's been fantastic about this program is I've actually been able to learn from both Craig and Adam's learnings, and through that be able to engage with the quality guest speakers and professionals within the field, that instead of having to try certain people who are, I've been able to learn from their learnings and get people in that know the science, but there's a real gift to be able to pass that science onto farmers in a way that they can actually understand and use that knowledge. So it's been good. We actually had someone that I think has been missed out. I've used fairly similar. I've used Doris Blessing and both Christian Bannon, and I got different things from them. Doris was probably good at helping us understand the more chemical understanding of the soil and the soil testing information, and did put that into context in the field. But I think Christian linked that up with the hydrology and the physics of the soil. We could have two soils with the similar soil test results, but then we'd go out and test those soils in the field, and they were completely different just based on the physics. So that was really good, and I found that fantastic too. That you go out in the field and the guys are like, do I need to bring my soil test information? And Christian actually made a point of, please don't bring them. Let's just have a look at it, the bones of it, just in the field, and we'll learn from what we're actually seeing. And farmers learn by doing pits. They can actually physically, they don't like the theory of, let's just talk in slides and in spreadsheets. To actually go out in the field, they learn best by doing, I think, and seeing, and being able to see it in the paddock context was a great way of learning. We also had Dr. Chris Preston from the University of Adelaide, and he came and spoke about some of the issues with resistance in chemical resistance in weed populations, and he was a fantastic orator. For him to speak to a field, he was so well received by the group, and the way that he explained what guys were seeing in the field was wonderful, and it was really practical in his advice too. So that was great. We also, we went up to Grant Sims's place twice actually. The first year that we went up there, we were so lucky to be part of the Vic No-Till conference, and we were able to see international guest speakers and Jonathan Lundgren, Odette Manar go through pits with them, and it mightn't seem significant just going on a field trip over to somebody else's property doing something different, but to actually see the guys push the status quo, to think outside the square, to actually consider that there's another option, and that it's not always going to be out of our grasp, that we can try something different, and it doesn't need to be too technical. We can just try a different species selection, or maybe not put that fungicide on. So I think that was, it sowed the seed that you've got to challenge what you know to then influence practice change. We can't just say you need to go and do this, and that needs to come from the bottom up, and that's where the groups being able to engage with different professionals, challenge their thinking, that you could see it's so hard to quantify that, but I can't stress enough that was such an important part of our learnings. So I'll go back to a bit about the Timor West group itself, and Phil has already touched on the fact that the Timor West group, it's sort of, we sprung out of an existing land care group, and that had already been doing work sort of in a similar place. And so from the momentum that we'd created as a group, there was a great synergy in continuing work that had already been done in a similar space, and continue that on through farming for sustainable soils. So it was actually, as you saw yesterday at Dunluce, like we're hoping that there will be a legacy to continue this work even after the Farming for Sustainable Soils program winds down. So the community-led approach is really important. And look, we've all talked about the social impact, and it all seems to be about the people within the groups. And I have to admit, like during the drought, it was so wonderful for the community to come together to focus on something really, really positive. But no one's actually, for me, there was being part of the community was reciprocal. I'm a relative newcomer to the area. Like, I mean, I've only known Mark 12 years, so it'll be another 50 before I'm a local. But, but like for me, coming into a new area, to be recognised for a passion in the field, and then to be able to engage with different people within the community, not only was it a really good social thing for the people involved, but it was also a really good thing for me at the time too. So I actually want to thank my group for welcoming me into their community and making me feel part of their community. And again, there's all these themes of structure and the soil. Well, not only were we breaking the barrier with tillage radish, we were breaking social barriers. Being able to share a problem is a problem halved. You know, and it's only until I think farmers really know the issues. They know where their better soils are, they know where their worse soils are, but how do we understand the mechanism of what's happening? And only until we can understand that can we start addressing ways that we might manage that. Oh, it probably won't go for 5 minutes, Phil, but I'd really like to have this opportunity to thank everyone that's been involved, not only from the beginning phases, because obviously we had Phil and everyone at the CMA, but then a lot of involvement with RMCG. I'd really like to also take the opportunity to thank the other facilitators too, because without their help and support, I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I did in the time frame that I've had. So thank you very much.